Hello everyone. Everyone who uses firearms knows that there are certain rules of etiquette when it comes to handling handguns and rifles and shotguns. And everyone wants to follow the proper rules, especially when you're looking at a gun that belongs to someone else or a gun that's in a store. And for the most part, people are pretty good. You're checking the chamber on the gun to make sure it's empty first before, as soon as you receive it in your hands, things like that. And you know, with a 22 rimfire, for instance, you wouldn't want to dry fire that. There's a lot of do's and don'ts when it comes to handling firearms. But the one area that I see the most ignorance in, quite honestly, is when it comes to revolvers. Now, revolvers are not as big a thing as they used to be at one time. A lot of people who are very experienced in the use of firearms, when it comes to handguns as well, they're quite often more knowledgeable in the use of and handling of semi-automatic pistols. And you know, revolvers are there, but it's not everyone's thing. It used to be a much more used type of handgun in the past, the revolver, but less so perhaps in later times. And the use of a revolver is something that really could use a little bit of explanation, because there is one mistake that people make when handling revolvers that is very, very common, and it's really off-putting to persons who are knowledgeable about revolvers, and it has to do with the way a revolver's cylinder is opened and closed. Now, here I have two revolvers, just for an example. I've got this one, Model 29, and this one, Security 6. So these are both checked for being empty. Now, you might have noticed that when I opened the cylinder, I opened it carefully and cradled the cylinder in my hand when I opened it, and when I close it carefully with the cylinder in my hand too. Now, what the mistake that you see very many people do, and I'm not going to do this, these are my guns, they'll open it and they'll flick it to get the cylinder open, and then the cylinder winds up wham, it's the bottom stop, and then when they want to close it, they go, I'm not going to do it, they'll go like that. Either that, or they're just going to flick it out, and then they slam it shut like that. Stuff like that, it just, I'll be honest, it drives a revolver shooter nuts. And if you pick up his gun and do that, he just might hit you. He might slap you in the face, because you do not do that to a revolver, and I see it happen so often. You know, they just go and they flick it out and they slam it back in, and I can see that sort of happening because in general, firearms are quite often handled, you know, pretty roughly. You know, you take a bolt action, slam this and that, and you want to, you know, display a certain level of confidence in handling a firearm, and really they aren't, they're not made of marshmallows. You know, they're made of steel, and they're made to be used, you know, pretty abruptly like that. So that kind of attitude and that practice, it transfers over to the handling of revolvers, where it is really out of place. I just got to emphasize that, okay? So when you take a revolver, this is a side topic, it's okay to dry fire it. You can dry fire this thing all day long. And top shooters, they do that all day long. They just dry fire and dry fire and dry fire. This gun here, I've dry fired it for 40 years. It's not going to hurt your handgun. That stuff is okay. But opening and closing the cylinder, but now maybe I got to back up a little bit here and explain why, because it's not good enough just to say don't do it, because a lot of people think, well, what's the harm in doing that? I mean, the thing is made out of steel. It's you're not going to hurt it, and people will say that. They'll just swear up and down that it's not going to hurt it, and they're wrong. Maybe the best way to explain it is if you take this handgun, let you take a closer look at it. Now you see this handgun has got a crane, what they call a crane. That's the part that swings out when you unlatch the cylinder. And that crane is a hinge. And you notice that that hinge is set forward of the cylinder, and once it's unlatched from the frame of the gun, there's nothing else supporting this heavy cylinder except for that crane or the yoke. You can think of it this way. Say you take your car or your truck. You have two hinges on the door. Take that top hinge off the door so that that door only has a hinge on the bottom. Okay? Now take that car of yours, and with the door slightly open, go and drive ahead and then stop. Put on the brakes really hard so the door flings out all the way forward. And then step on the gas so the car door with only one hinge on the bottom goes and slams shut. Now drive ahead and stop again, fling it open, hit the gas, slam it shut. Keep on doing that a few times, and let me just ask you, how long do you think that door hinge is going to last on that car? You're going to wreck it. It's going to be out of line in no time. And that's exactly what's happening with these things. So when you have a handgun, these are very precisely made tools, very precise. People perhaps don't have an appreciation for that. This cylinder that revolves has to revolve in perfect alignment with the barrel. If you don't have perfect alignment, it's not, that bullet has got to make a jump from the cylinder to the forcing cone of the barrel in order to shoot properly. And if it's slightly out of alignment, it's not going to shoot proper. The tightness of the fit between the cylinder and the barrel, when this cylinder closes, is so tight you can just barely see a sliver of light through it. That's how precisely they are made, which when you think of it, when you've got a rotating hinge, that's quite something to accomplish. Not only that, but also where it fits in the back. You may see there's a gap on this Model 29, for instance, because it's using a rimmed cartridge, a 44 mag cartridge. So when the gun closes, the cylinder closes, that rim of the cartridge, of the case, has to fill up that gap perfectly. And I know from experience that even if the primer is a little bit high on the case, the fit is so tight that you won't be able to close the cylinder. That's how precisely these guns are made. Another way to look at it is that joint that closes up when you close the cylinder on the yoke and crane there. If you look at it closely, when it closes on a well-made gun, you can't hardly see the crack. It almost becomes one piece of metal. That's how tightly it's fitted. So what happens when you close a cylinder too roughly, in the way that I was describing earlier? What happens is that you will eventually throw this cylinder barrel alignment out of whack. And if it goes out of whack even a little bit, the fit is so tight that eventually the cylinder won't even close. And before that, it's already going to become a bad shooting gun, and the yoke will start coming loose at the hinge. So if you're kind of wanting to check that, you can, with an empty firearm, you can put your finger on that crack and fire a double action. See if you can feel any movement. Same thing goes with the Security 6. It closes up tight. If the gun is being banged around a lot, what's going to happen, not only is that hinge going to start getting some play in it, but you could damage also the ejector rod, because once the gun is closed, then it is strong, because it closes up and it engages with the ejector rod and this pin at the back in the firewall, and then the gun is locked together. So, but if you slam it together, you're going to do damage to that little pin that locks into the firewall and the ejector rod, because they're both snap fits in there. It's meant to be closed gradually. You don't have to go to the extent of pushing the release button while you're closing the cylinder. Just do it gently. Be reasonable about it. If the gun is out of alignment, what you will also start to see is if you rotate the cylinder, you'll see a wobble on the end of that ejector rod, and that's from slamming the gun. So many people do this. You can also rotate just the ejector and check that cylinder, make sure there's no wobble at all in that. So that is one of the things that I've been meaning to make a video about. I see it done a lot, and really when this applies to gun stores and stuff like that too. I, as a revolver user, and I know any other avid revolver user who sees a revolver in a gun shop being slammed shut and slammed open, they're not going to buy that gun. In fact, they may not go back to that gun shop again, because it's, for a revolver shooter, it's just really idiotic. It's an abuse of a handgun, and it just happens so often. It even happens amongst people who are experienced revolver shooters who have never been told that that's not what you do, because you don't see it in movies, and that's they call that the sort of the Bogart move from Humphrey Bogart. Yeah, just because they do it in the movies doesn't mean it's a good idea. Just like shooting a gun sideways is not a good idea, even though they do that in the movies. So don't make yourself look like an idiot by slamming open the cylinder of your revolver, especially if it's your buddy's revolver or somebody asks you to take a look at their revolver. Be very respectful of it. That's one way to make yourself look like a bit of an idiot on the shooting range. If you do that, any revolver shooter who knows his stuff sees somebody slam open the cylinder of a revolver, it really irks them, and they just know this guy doesn't know what he's doing. So very important. Take care of your revolvers. It's not like just any other firearm. They're very precise made pieces of equipment. And that's my little spiel on the proper care of a handgun in case of revolver. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Hope I didn't get anybody too ticked off over some of the things I said, but you know, they just have to be said. And if you didn't know this before, don't feel too bad. It's maybe not that obvious. Just if you have been doing it, stop doing it. Okay, see you next time.